The words felt heavy on my tongue as I forced them out. Derek, I lost my job today. I watched his face carefully, searching for even a flicker of concern. Nothing. His fingers didn't pause on his keyboard. His eyes didn't leave the screen. For 3 long seconds, the only sound in our Seattle apartment was the rhythmic clicking of his mouse. Then he looked up, and what I saw wasn't worry. It wasn't sympathy. It was disgust. "I'm not even surprised you lost that job," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut. He shut his laptop with a deliberate snap that made me flinch. "You've always had this arrogant way of doing things. Maybe getting knocked down a few pegs will teach you something." I stood in the doorway, still wearing my work blazer, my purse strap digging into my shoulder. I'd imagined this moment during the entire walk home from the office, rehearsed it a dozen different ways. In every version, Derek pulled me close, told me we'd figure it out together, reminded me that we were a team. This wasn't that version. This wasn't that man. The truth was suffocating me. I hadn't been fired. 3 hours ago, my boss called me into her office and promoted me to senior marketing director. Unexpected. Career-changing. The kind of news that should have had me running home to celebrate. But instead, I'd walked slowly through Capitol Hill, past the coffee shop where Derek and I used to meet on Saturdays, past the park where we'd gotten engaged 8 years ago, and with every step, doubt crept in like fog off Puget Sound. What if he resented my success? What if earning more than him shattered whatever fragile thing we had left? Derek came from old money, the kind of family where the husband provided and the wife existed gracefully in the background. His mother, Patricia, had said it 1,000 times in our 8 years of marriage, her voice dripping with certainty. A man builds the foundation. A woman makes it beautiful. I'd laughed it off for nearly a decade. 2 years dating, 8 years married. But watching Derek now, seeing him look at me like I was some liability he'd been forced to carry, those words felt prophetic. "Do you understand what you've done to us?" he continued, standing abruptly. "How exactly do you think we'll pay our bills now?" Not once did he ask how I felt. Not once did he ask what happened. My throat closed. I couldn't have spoken even if I'd wanted to. I don't remember much about the rest of that evening. The details blurred together like watercolors left in the rain. At some point, I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and stood under the shower until the water ran cold against my skin. Derek slept on the couch without saying another word. I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling while car headlights swept across the walls like searchlights. My mind wouldn't stop racing. The signs had been there for months. I'd just been too afraid to name them. The late nights at his architectural firm that stretched later and later. The way his phone migrated from the kitchen counter to his pocket. Always face down. Always locked. How our Saturday morning breakfasts at that little cafe on Pine Street, a tradition we'd kept sacred for years, suddenly became maybe next time, with increasing frequency. I'd blamed the stress. His firm had landed a major downtown project, some luxury condos near Pike Place Market. He was working more. That made sense. It had to make sense, because the alternative, that the man I'd shared 8 years of my life with was slipping away, was too devastating to consider. But there was one moment I couldn't shake, one memory that kept replaying in my head, like a song stuck on repeat. 6 weeks ago, I'd left work early. Our marketing campaign wrapped ahead of schedule, and I thought I'd surprise Derek. Cook his favorite meal, open that bottle of wine we'd been saving, maybe remind ourselves who we used to be. I'd let myself in quietly, expecting to find him working at the dining room table. Instead, I heard his voice drifting from the bedroom. He was on the phone, speaking in a tone I'd never heard before. Clipped, calculated, careful. "No, she doesn't know anything yet," he said after a long pause. "We just need a little more time." Then he laughed. Not the warm sound I'd fallen in love with, but something cold and hollow that made my stomach turn. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand still on the doorknob, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain he'd hear it. He was talking about me. I knew it with the kind of certainty that lives in your bones. When he walked out moments later, he saw me and smiled, kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. I smiled back and started cooking dinner, but something inside me cracked that night. I called in sick the next morning. Not to work. I was still employed, still promoted, still carrying a secret Derek knew nothing about. But I needed space. I needed time to think without his eyes on me, without having to perform the role of the devastated, unemployed wife he believed I was. Derek left for the office at his usual time, briefcase in hand, barely glancing in my direction. "Feel better," he'd muttered, his voice flat and obligatory. The apartment felt different in the silence. Larger somehow. Emptier. I made coffee and sat by the window overlooking Elliott Avenue, watching the morning commuters flood the sidewalks below. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that mine was quietly dismantling itself. Around 2 o'clock, I heard the front door open. I froze, cup halfway to my lips. Derek wasn't supposed to be home, but that was definitely his key in the lock, his familiar footsteps in the entryway. And then, another voice, female, polished, unmistakable. Patricia, his mother. My pulse quickened. I moved silently toward the hallway, positioning myself just out of sight near the guest room door. I knew I shouldn't listen, knew it was wrong, but my instincts were screaming, and I'd learned to trust them. So, everything's going according to plan? Patricia's voice was bright, almost cheerful. Exactly as you predicted, Derek replied. There was satisfaction in his tone that made my skin crawl. She told me yesterday she got fired, completely devastated, just like you said she'd be. I pressed my hand against my mouth, forcing myself to stay silent. Finally, Patricia said, exhaling with obvious relief. Now she'll have no choice. She'll have to agree to our terms. My knees weakened. I leaned against the wall, struggling to process what I was hearing. She's completely dependent on me now, Derek continued, his voice casual, matter-of-fact. Selling the house will be simple. The house, the converted brownstone in Capitol Hill that Derek's father left him. The home I'd poured years of my life into, my money into. New appliances, renovated bathrooms, custom bookshelves I'd designed myself. They were planning to sell it, without me, as if I were already gone. See? Patricia's voice dripped with smugness. I told you that girl was never right for you. Too ambitious, too independent. Do you honestly think she'd still be here if it weren't for your father's house? The air left my lungs. Patricia's words echoed in my head, cruel and deliberate. That girl, not Sophia, not your wife, just an obstacle they'd been waiting to remove. Don't start, Mom, Derek said with a sigh. We've been over this. And what about Vanessa? Patricia asked, her tone shifting to something softer. When are you planning to tell Sophia it's time? Vanessa. The name hit me like ice water. Vanessa Reed, Ethan's girlfriend before the accident. Ethan, Derek's older brother, died in a car crash 2 years ago. It devastated the entire family. Vanessa had been at the funeral, quiet and pale, standing in the back row. I remembered thinking she looked fragile, lost. After that day, she disappeared. I assumed she'd moved on, tried to heal somewhere far from the memories. I never imagined Derek had stayed in touch with her. She's ready, Derek said, and his voice changed. Gentler, warmer, the way he used to speak to me. The baby's doing great. Vanessa says he's growing fast. Already looks just like Ethan. My mind reeled. Vanessa had been pregnant when Ethan died. I remembered now. She'd been showing slightly at the funeral, maybe 4 or 5 months along. I'd assumed she'd lost the baby in her grief, or that she'd quietly given birth somewhere far away and moved on. I never imagined she'd kept the child, or that Derek had been there the entire time, waiting, planning to step into his dead brother's place like some twisted understudy finally getting his moment on stage. My vision blurred. I gripped the doorframe to keep from collapsing. The baby. Ethan's baby. I'll adopt him as soon as the divorce is finalized, Derek continued, speaking as though he were discussing a business transaction. He'll be my son. Our son. I'm so proud of you, Patricia cooed. Just think how happy Vanessa will be when she hears the house is going on the market. She's waited long enough for this, Derek. You both have. The room spun. My ears rang. This wasn't just betrayal. This was erasure. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to replace me. With Vanessa. With Ethan's child. With a ready-made family that fit Patricia's vision of what Derek's life should look like. And I was nothing but an inconvenience. A placeholder who'd overstayed her welcome. I always knew Vanessa was perfect for you, Patricia continued. It's just a shame you met her too late, after you'd already married that one. That one. I bit down hard on my knuckle, tasting blood. My entire body shook, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stand there and listen as my husband and his mother discussed my removal like I was furniture they were donating. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Derek said. We still need to make sure Sophia doesn't fight the divorce. She won't fight, Patricia said confidently. Not if you handle it correctly. Remind her she has nowhere to go. No job, no savings. She'll fold like they always do. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was trapped. But I wasn't. Not entirely. Not yet. And if she doesn't fold? Derek asked. There was an edge to his voice now, something calculating. What if she gets a lawyer? Patricia made a dismissive sound. Then you hit her with the infidelity angle. I nearly stumbled backward. What infidelity? What are you talking about? Derek asked. Doesn't matter if it's true, Patricia said coolly. You have those photos from that conference she attended last year, don't you? Her with those colleagues at the hotel bar? They can be interpreted, appropriately, enough to plant doubt. My blood ran cold. She was talking about the marketing summit in Portland, a work event, professional networking. I'd been photographed with my team having drinks after a panel discussion. Innocent. Completely innocent. But in Patricia's hands, in a courtroom, twisted by the right lawyer. You're brilliant, Mom, Derek said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Just like Dad. If that doesn't work, he continued, gaining momentum now, we can always say she was leaking client information. She brought work files home all the time. I'll testify I caught her trying to sell data to competitors. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. This was my husband, the man who'd held my hand during my father's funeral, who'd painted our bedroom while I picked out colors, who'd promised to love me through everything, and now he was plotting to destroy my reputation, my career, my entire life, just to clear a path for Vanessa, and a child who wasn't even his. How is the baby doing? Derek asked, his tone shifting again to that unsettling tenderness. Strong, Patricia replied proudly. Vanessa says he's got Ethan's eyes, his smile. You'll see for yourself soon enough. They were building a new family. Derek, Vanessa, the baby, and Patricia orchestrating it all like some twisted fairy godmother. And in their minds, I was already gone. Just paperwork. Just one final conversation. I'll tell her tonight, Derek said. She's already fragile after losing her job. It's the perfect time. I'll be sympathetic. Tell her it's better for both of us. Offer her some cash to walk away quietly. Patricia laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Play up the pity. Make her feel like a burden. Women like her always cave under that kind of pressure. I bit my lip so hard I tasted copper. But even through the pain, something unexpected happened. I smiled. Just barely. Just enough. Because they had no idea. No idea that I hadn't been fired. No idea that I'd just been promoted to senior marketing director with a salary that would make Derek's architectural fees look modest. No idea that their entire plan was built on a foundation of lies that was already crumbling. I stayed crouched behind that door long after their voices faded. Long after I heard the front door close behind Patricia. Long after the couch creaked under Derek's weight as he settled in to watch television like this was just another ordinary afternoon. My body was frozen, but my mind was on fire. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was war, and I'd walked into it unarmed and unaware. But not anymore. That evening, Derek acted like nothing had happened. He poured himself a bourbon, turned on a Seahawks game, glanced at me with that carefully neutral expression that now looked grotesque and false. I didn't speak to him, didn't trust myself to. If I opened my mouth, I might shatter the illusion, and I needed that illusion intact, at least for now. In bed that night, I lay with my back to him, eyes wide open in the darkness. He fell asleep quickly, his breathing evening out into that familiar rhythm, as if the day hadn't included plotting my complete destruction, as if he hadn't just designed my public humiliation with his mother's help. I listened to him sleep and made my own plans. The next morning, I left before sunrise. I didn't go to work. Not immediately. Instead, I went to the storage unit we rented near the waterfront, the one filled with old boxes and forgotten belongings. I needed proof, evidence that I'd contributed to that house, that I'd invested in it with more than just my presence. I pulled out everything I could find. The receipt for the kitchen appliances I'd purchased with my year-end bonus, the invoice for the custom bathroom tiles I'd selected and paid for, the contract for the built-in bookshelves, the receipts for furniture, artwork, the new water heater when the old one died. Every single piece of paper that proved I'd poured my money, my choices, my life into that home. I packed them all into a waterproof bag and drove across town to the only person I trusted completely. Julia Thompson lived in a small craftsman house in Fremont. She'd been my colleague for 5 years, but somewhere along the way, she'd become my closest friend. She knew my coffee order, remembered my birthday, had talked me through every career doubt I'd ever had. Most importantly, she'd never once betrayed my confidence, and that made her invaluable now. When I showed up at her door just after 7 in the morning, she took one look at my face and stepped aside without a word. "I need a favor," I said quietly, stepping into Julia's warm kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, almost comforting in its normalcy. "Say no more," she replied, already pulling out a chair for me. I placed the waterproof bag on her kitchen table, the documents inside suddenly feeling like the most valuable thing I owned. If anything happens to me, if I disappear, if I stop answering calls, if something goes wrong, give these to my lawyer. Julia's eyebrows rose, concern flooding her expression. "Sophia, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "I can't explain everything right now," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I'm not being paranoid. I just can't take any risks. Not with this." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, whatever you need. I've got your back." The tension in my chest loosened just slightly. I hadn't told her everything. Not about Vanessa, not about the baby, not about the elaborate conspiracy I'd overheard. But she understood enough. Something was deeply wrong, and I needed her. For now, that was enough. I left Julia's house feeling marginally stronger. Not whole, but less fractured. As I drove back through morning traffic, I passed the park near Green Lake, where Derek and I used to jog on Sunday mornings. I remembered how he'd hold my hand during those walks, how he'd look at me like I mattered, like I was his whole world. That man was dead. The person waiting at home was a stranger wearing his face, and tonight, that stranger was going to sit me down and ask me to disappear quietly from my own life. He had no idea I was already planning to make sure he lost everything instead. When I walked through the front door that evening, I could see it on his face. The performance was ready, the script rehearsed. Derek Morrison was about to play the role of the reluctant but compassionate husband, doing the hard but necessary thing. "Hey," he said, his voice carefully modulated, low, concerned. "We should talk." I gave him a tired smile, just enough to look worn down, just enough to keep him confident. "Sure. What's going on?" He gestured toward the living room. I noticed he'd already set the stage. Dimmed lights, 2 glasses of wine on the coffee table, a throw blanket draped artfully over the armrest like this was going to be some tender, mutual decision, like he was doing me a favor by dismantling my life gently. I sat on the couch. He took the armchair across from me, lacing his fingers together, letting out a sigh so theatrical I almost laughed. "Sophia," he began, "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us, about where we are, and I think we've grown apart." I kept my eyes on the wine glass, nodding slightly, playing the part he expected. "I don't want this to be ugly," he continued, leaning forward with practiced sincerity. "I don't want lawyers or courtrooms. I just think it's time we both admitted this marriage isn't working anymore." He sounded heartbroken, like he was the victim here, like this decision was tearing him apart from the inside. "I mean, with you being out of work now," he added, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Maybe this is actually a good time for a fresh start. For both of us." My stomach twisted, but I kept my expression soft, vulnerable, let my bottom lip tremble just slightly. "Are you saying divorce?" He nodded, reaching for his wineglass like he deserved a reward for his bravery. "Yeah, but amicable, civil. I don't want to fight, Sophia. I'm willing to help you get on your feet. You'll need a place to stay, obviously. Some money to get settled." I tilted my head, letting my voice crack just a little. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course," he said, placing a hand over his heart like some kind of savior. "I still care about you. I don't think we're right for each other anymore. We've both changed." He paused for effect, then delivered the line I knew was coming. "And the house. It's legally mine. My father left it to me. But I want to be fair. I'll offer you a settlement, something to help with rent for a few months." "How much?" I whispered. He named a figure. It was insulting. A fraction of what I'd invested into that home over 8 years. Barely enough to cover 3 months in a decent Seattle apartment. But I didn't laugh, didn't argue. Instead, I stared at him like I was seeing him clearly for the first time. I thought we'd try harder," I said, my voice barely audible. "I thought we were stronger than this." Derek reached across the space between us, touching my hand with all the tenderness of a man playing a role he no longer believed in. "I'm sorry, but this is the best path forward, I promise." And right then, I gave him exactly what he wanted. I nodded slowly, eyes glistening, lips pressed together in defeat. Okay, I breathed. I'll think about it. His entire body relaxed. Relief washed over his face. He'd done it. He'd broken me. Or so he thought. Take your time, he said gently. There's no rush. But behind my silence, behind the trembling breath and the tears threatening to spill, I was already 3 steps ahead. Because he didn't want lawyers. But I'd already found the best one in Seattle. The next morning, I left the house before Derek stirred. He was still sprawled on the couch, buried under blankets like a child hiding from consequences. I didn't leave a note, no explanation, no polite goodbye, just silence. Let him wonder. Downtown Seattle was just waking up when I stepped into the glass building on 4th Avenue, where Catherine Ross's office occupied the entire 12th floor. The lobby smelled faintly of leather and ambition. I sat in the waiting room for 10 minutes that felt like an eternity, rehearsing what I'd say. But when Catherine opened her door and called my name, I stood up, walked in, and told her everything. Not everything. I left out some details about Vanessa, about the baby, but I gave Catherine enough. Enough for a lawyer to see the battlefield clearly. The inherited house, the 8 years of shared expenses, the receipts and bank statements proving my financial contributions. The way Derek wanted a quick, quiet divorce with a settlement so low it was practically mockery. Catherine listened without judgment. Her face remained calm, analytical, her pen moving steadily across a yellow legal pad like she'd been preparing for this war her entire career. "You've been married 8 years?" she asked, her tone precise. 8 legally. 2 before that, I corrected. She made a note. "Any children?" "No." "Proof of financial contributions to the home?" "I have receipts, invoices, bank statements, everything. Appliances, renovations, custom work, all documented." Catherine leaned back in her chair, folded her hands, and looked at me directly. "Sophia, you have a case. A strong one. But I need you to understand something before we move forward." I met her eyes, waiting. "If we do this, there's no turning back. It won't be pretty. He's going to fight. And based on what you've told me, he's going to fight dirty." "He already is," I said quietly. Something shifted in her expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition of a fighter she hadn't expected to find sitting across from her. "Then let's get to work." When I stepped outside onto 4th Avenue, the air felt different. Lighter. Colder. The weight that had been crushing my chest for weeks had eased, just slightly. I wasn't flailing in the dark anymore. I had someone in my corner who saw the pieces clearly and knew exactly how to play them. I went straight to the office after that. No more hiding. No more pretending. I walked through the doors of our tech startup's headquarters with my head high, greeted my team, sat down at my desk, and opened the department dashboard like nothing had happened. Because to everyone here, nothing had. I was still senior marketing director, still respected, still employed. Derek thought I was unemployed, broken, desperate, but I was back, fully, completely. My phone buzzed around noon, a text from Derek. "Hope you're doing okay. Let me know when you're ready to talk more about next steps." Next steps. I almost laughed out loud. He had no idea I'd already taken them. I typed back a simple reply. "Will do." That afternoon, I met with my team, reviewed quarterly projections, scheduled one-on-ones, and approved a major campaign for our newest client. I was efficient, focused, unshakable. And when I finally walked out of the building at sunset, the city lights reflecting off Puget Sound in the distance, I knew something had shifted permanently inside me. I wasn't the same woman who'd stood frozen in that hallway, who'd shaken in silence while her husband planned her erasure. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone else, someone stronger, someone sharper, someone ready. Derek wanted me to vanish quietly into the background of his new life with Vanessa, but now I was preparing to take everything back, on my terms, with my voice, and he would never see it coming. The divorce took 10 weeks to finalize, not because I dragged it out, because Derek did. Once he realized I wasn't going to fold, he fought back with everything Patricia had taught him. His lawyer tried every tactic in the playbook, but Catherine was sharper, smarter, ruthless when she needed to be. She had copies of every receipt, every bank transfer, every signature I'd ever made on that house. We didn't ask for more than what was fair, but we made damn sure Derek couldn't keep what wasn't his. In the end, I walked away with a substantial settlement and full legal recognition of my financial contributions, not just to the house, but to 8 years of building something real before he decided to burn it all down. The final hearing was in a sterile conference room downtown. Vanessa wasn't there, but I could feel her ghost hovering behind Derek's shoulder, waiting to move in the moment the ink dried. Derek didn't meet my eyes. Not once. He signed the papers with a tight jaw and shaking hands. When it was over, I stood, tucked my pen into my bag and walked toward the door. Then I stopped, turned back. Derek. He looked up, surprised I'd spoken directly to him after weeks of silence. "I need to tell you something," I said calmly. "I was never fired." His face went blank, confused. "That day I came home and told you I lost my job," I continued, watching comprehension slowly dawn in his eyes. "I'd actually been promoted to senior marketing director, with a salary significantly higher than yours." The color drained from his face. "I lied to test you, to see if you'd support me when I needed you." I smiled, cold and satisfied. "And you failed spectacularly." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You and Patricia planned everything based on a lie I told you, and now you've lost the house, the settlement, and any shred of dignity you had left." I let that sink in for a moment. "You always underestimated me, Derek. That was your biggest mistake." I walked out without looking back. 3 months later, I moved into a modern apartment overlooking Elliott Bay. Not huge, not extravagant, but completely mine. The first night I slept there, I kept every light on, not out of fear, but because I could. No one to criticize me, no one to call me wasteful, just silence, peaceful, earned. Word filtered back through mutual acquaintances that Derek and Vanessa were struggling. Apparently, raising a toddler while managing a failing architectural firm wasn't the romantic fresh start they'd imagined. Patricia tried to help, of course, micromanaging their lives like she always did. But money was tighter than expected. The settlement had gutted Derek's savings. Vanessa hadn't quite fit into the perfect family fantasy Patricia had designed. None of it surprised me. Their entire foundation was built on lies and manipulation. Those don't hold up for long. I don't check on them anymore. I've rebuilt my life deliberately, intentionally. My career is thriving. My team respects me. I've taken up rock climbing on weekends, started writing again. There are pieces of myself I thought were lost forever, buried under years of making myself smaller to accommodate someone else's ego. But they weren't lost, just waiting. And now, I take up all the space I need. Thank you for watching until the end. Your support is very important. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.